Delicious. Test 1, 2. Test. There we go. Nice to see you. Good to be back. My name is Dean. That is a harmonica you're listening to. As I get ready to drink my delicious cold beverage, usually start with a hot beverage out of coffee today. Just realized it, so now it's a cold beverage, soda water, peach, sparkling, orange grapefruit, aha. Orange grapefruit, aha. That is it. The soda water wars are the greatest. Everybody's trying to come up with new soda. When you don't drink alcohol, it's like, oh, okay, I'll have a soda water war with myself and see which soda water I like the most. Anyway, I got my soda water. We got a busy show today. We have got the biggest news commentary podcaster in Canada to join us today because we need a little help. He's from crier.co, Crier Media. Go to crier.co. Go and download this gentleman's podcast called The Charles Adler Show. Please welcome to the program, my friend and yours, the voice of reason in the Canadian media landscape, Mr. Charles Adler, ladies and gentlemen. Charles, nice to see you. How are we today in Winnipeg,
good.
On Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, which I've never been there in the summer, by the way, ever once. Always
I checked my mailing address, or it's one of my mailing addresses, Winnipeg, and I love Winnipeg and all that. But really, you know that I live inside my mind, and I'm fueled by coffee. So I've got coffee in this hand, and then I've got tea in this hand.
What else?
And then I've got in my third hand, on my fourth leg,
water.
I've got some Diet Pepsi. So I drink a lot of liquids when I'm talking to certain people, especially you.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. I need you hydrated for these things because I keep you a long time. You're like me. Not many people are like have drink envy all the time. It's like I always got to have a drink in my hand. I don't know it's because I used to drink, but if I don't have some kind of drink in my hand to wet my whistle all the time, maybe it's because we're talkers. But like everybody around me finds it weird. When I go to a restaurant, it's like I'll have a soda water with lime, I'll have a coffee, and a cranberry with soda water too. 3 drinks. And they're like, really? You want fucking 3 drinks? I'm like, pardon my language. I'm like, yes, I do. I would like 3 drinks. And everyone thinks I'm crazy, but it's nice to have you as a soulmate in the drink department.
Well, I'm drinking all the time, and I've been promised that as long as there's no alcohol in it, I don't have to go to rehab. So that's a a lot of incentive for me right there.
Yeah, staying out of rehab. Anyway, nice to see you. What are we doing in Winnipeg today? Like, is it 26 degrees? Are the mosquitoes the size of eagles? What's happening?
I don't. You know what?
Have you been outside? Have you opened the window?
Here's the problem. Here's by the way, nobody does small talk better than you do.
No,
you're gonna go down in history. Man, what a small talker he is.
What a great small talker.
But if you insist on small talk, I'm gonna have to come back large.
Yeah.
Okay. I've lived in Winnipeg over the course of I've come back and forth, whatever. I'm like a kid. I can't stay in the room. Johnny, stay. No, don't touch the gun. All right. So I have come and gone over the course of almost 30 years. Okay. Winnipeg, 5 years here, 6 years there, but I'm always coming home.
Always come back. They always bring you back in.
I'm the dog, the cat that, there was an animal that got injured. I actually got really upset about this earlier today. My friend Jan Arden was talking about it. It wasn't a dog or a cat. It's a very, very cool animal, and it'll come to me later. And I can't believe these goons in her neighborhood decided to torture this poor thing, and the poor thing had to be put out of its misery. It's a hedgehog. It's a hedgehog.
A hedgehog. Oh my God. I love those little things.
Which is not cute. A pig.
No.
Not that I'm against pigs.
No, I love pigs.
I try not, but it was a gorgeous hedgehog. Delicious. And they like duct taped the hedgehog's legs.
Are you serious?
I mean, who does this kind of, and Jan thinks that people like that are absolutely for sure going to be hurting people someday.
Yeah. Without question.
Because you read about these serial killers and these other losers, and you find out that they started off by torturing animals. I only say this not to be Johnny Do-Good. Just if you've got someone in your family that's duct taping the hedges, legs or any legs, hamsters, hedgehogs, whatever, torturing animals.
Get them some help.
Yeah, get them to rehab. The spot that I'm not occupying, okay, there's a spot there with my name on it. Have at it, okay?
Speaking of antisocial behavior, because that's what that's called, right? I found that out because I remember when one of my kids was younger, we were at a therapist, and was like, is he hurting animals? I'm like, no. What do you mean, is he hurting animals? Well, that's a sign of someone that doesn't have any empathy. It's a sign of someone that is a psycho. It's a sign of someone that is like turns into a serial killer, or like a guy who ends up becoming the president of the United States
Right.
and stealing state secrets. And boy, oh boy, we got one of those. And this is sort of the only topic today. So I had to lead in with a little Winnipeg stuff where we're trying to start talking about hedgehogs. But it really was just my effort to kind of dull the blade before we start chopping away. But the biggest story in the world, which is why Charles Adler is here to help talk about this, is Donald J. Trump. Yesterday was sent a letter. Sunday was sent a letter by the special prosecutor, guy named Jack Smith. And he said to Donald Trump and his lawyers, "Sir, you're the target of a criminal investigation for starting an insurrection and an attempted coup of the United States of America. And we're letting you know that in the next few days, you will be arrested and charged with something very, very, very serious." Now, you and I chatted about this morning, and you sort of brought me up to speed on it. I started to dig into it. We're going to get into some audio. We're going to try and suss out what this means for Donald Trump, for the United States of America, what it might mean if the dude still wins, because he's right there, because America is sick AF, if you will. But we're also going to talk about what this means for our beautiful country in Canada, because as we know, the stuff that gets squeezed out of the toothpaste canister in the United States eventually ends up here as a result, whether it's media, whether it's politics, whether it's ideology, whether it's, anti-vaccine or anti-this or fascism. I mean, it bleeds. Everything from down there bleeds up here. So what do we make of this? And I'll get to it real quick, just so we can kind of have the short strokes. But Mr. Trump is in very deep doo-doo. He was apparently, the J6 tapes are about to be released. Sorry, that is the wrong slide. Donald Trump was indicted. Here's what he says. We'll put it in his words. "Wow, on Sunday night while I was with my family, I just arrived from the Turning Point event in Florida where I won the straw poll against other Republican candidates with 85.7. Still can't stop talking about himself the day he gets a letter saying you're going to jail. Republican primary, substantial, almost predicting I will win the Republican nomination. Horrifying news. Our country was given to me by my attorneys." The deranged Jack Smith, the prosecutor with Joe Biden's DOJ, sent a letter again Sunday night stating, "I am a target," big bold letters, "of the January 6th grand jury investigation, giving me very short 4 days to report to the grand jury," which almost always means an arrest and an indictment. He goes on to say Joe Biden's Attorney General Merrick Garland, who I turned down for United States Supreme Court in retrospect based on his corrupt and unethical actions, and on, Clinton White House, Russia hoax, FBI sucks, Manhattan DA sucks. And he really points out this witch hunt is all about election interference, complete and total political weaponization of law enforcement. It is a very sad, dark period for our nation. Charles Adler, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think?
Well, let me put this first of all in Canadian terms, because I want the audience to feel as included as possible. I want you to know, folks, that attempting a coup in the United States is a bigger deal than being at the self-serve at the Loblaws, dragging the Campbell soup through it not ringing and you putting it in your bag anyway. That's shoplifting. Shoplifting is usually punishable with a fine, or more often than not, Granny just does an explanation, didn't mean to do it, no record, no criminal record. They kind of let it go.
Yeah.
That's not as big a deal as what Donald Trump tried to do. And for Donald Trump to lead into this letter with, "Oh, by the way, I did really well in the straw poll in Florida. Special prosecution may be important. The coup may be important. But what's most important is to let you know that Trailer Park Willie voted for me." Okay. All right. Now let's get into the business of the issue he has here.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how steep the crime is. Okay. Attempting to overthrow the country, if you're just a regular person, not Donald Trump, you're not a reality show star, you're not a former president, you're just, you're Trailer Park Willie. Trailer Park Willie would go to jail for the rest of his natural life.
Uh-huh.
Donald Trump is not likely to go to jail. What's more likely is they will try to cut a deal with him to stay out of the White House. I don't know whether he would take that deal or whether he would simply say, take me to jail, put the leg irons on me. I can still run for president from jail. I think I can raise even more money from jail, maybe much more money. And Donald Trump likes the idea of money. Not all the money he raises ends up going into his political campaigns. There are ways and means that people find of getting money that they raise in campaigns into their pockets. Yeah. It has been done. And if anyone can do it, it's Donald Trump. So he loves having opportunities to raise money. He loves having opportunities to raise his profile. Most important, he loves the idea of cable news and other news, including what we're doing here, talking about him 24/7. That's what he lives for. It's one of the reasons he wants to be president. He's guaranteed when he's president, people will talk about him, not just in America, but around the world. So the question becomes, if they not just indict him, because that'll be done very soon, he will be indicted. He will plea. He will, plead innocent.
4 days. They said it's going to happen in 4 days, Charles.
Yeah. And so that's just, around the corner. But even if there's a trial, even if they can get a trial in before the next election, and of course, what his lawyers always ask for, because now they've got several criminal indictments they're thinking about and worried about, they just say, have a trial, but wait until after the election. If they have a trial before the election, he can still run from prison. And as soon as he gets elected, and by the way, as crazy as this may sound, I do think he has a better chance being elected as a prisoner than as a free person, because we've all gone crazy, okay? But if he gets elected, okay, or maybe I should say if and when he's elected, because the other side is split into a number of candidates, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., we can get into that later. But if and when Donald Trump is elected, he can pardon himself. I know that also sounds crazy to Granny, who's been shoplifting Campbell's soup, but I'm telling you, Granny, okay, I'm telling you, Donald Trump can declare that whatever happened in the courts, millions of dollars on investigations, all kinds of witnesses, years and years of yap, 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 yap on all the news shows, with a keystroke, okay? Donald Trump can keystroke, wave the wand, whatever image you want. He can instantly pardon himself. And that's the Donald Trump plan right now. And I know that people think that that's preposterous. It's crazy. I want to remind you that when Donald Trump first ran, all the usual suspects, many of them intelligent, many of them learned, they knew their history, they knew law, they knew political science, they knew stuff.
Yeah.
But they had no idea how wrong they were. Well, I'm telling you, he's got a better chance now of becoming president, despite all of this criminal indictment stuff, despite, he just stole some treasures from Israel. That was reported today. He had nuclear secrets in the bathroom. That's been reported. It doesn't matter what they throw at him in the criminal area. It doesn't matter how often we say that nobody else could survive this. Trailer Park Willie couldn't survive this. Shoplifting Granny at Loblaws couldn't survive this. Donald Trump can survive anything. When Donald Trump said a few years ago that he could shoot someone at Fifth Avenue, right the center of Midtown Manhattan, he could shoot and kill someone and he still wouldn't go to prison. Donald Trump knew what he was talking about. See, Donald Trump understands the power of Donald Trump better than anybody else. And you can call him crazy. He's crazy like a fox.
Yeah, dude, I don't disagree with you. I mean, the regular things that most people would get put in front of firing squads for, because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about executable stuff, right? Which is treason, sedition. That's what Jack Smith is trying to wrangle. And I don't know what the charging documents are saying. I guess we'll find those out over the next couple of days, if and when he gets arrested, charged, and indicted with trying to mastermind, because that's what this is. And I don't know what you've heard, but do you think he's getting charged with masterminding the insurrection? And are we going to see, because this is what I've loved about some of the stuff that we've seen with the previous indictments, is they've played it out for us. They have laid out what he has done. They have put out pictures of like boxes in his bathroom, with top secret information in them. They have said, hey, is this normal to you? Does this look like something that's allowed to happen? And we've watched Donald Trump literally kind of, hang himself, for lack of a better term, running around going, I can just decide in my mind that that's okay. And as the president, I can do it. you talk about the strategy, right, being one thing is he's trying to run out the clock where he can get back into office and then pardon himself and everybody involved in his bullshit. But this is a very dangerous game for the United States of America, because there are a lot of people in the United States of America, and we see these clips all the time, Charles, of people saying, hey, if Donald Trump goes to jail for attempting an insurrection, stealing documents, skeeving tax money, the litany of things, Georgia hasn't even landed yet, would you still support him? And you know what? Majority of MAGA people say, they're like, absolutely. Why wouldn't I? I'm like, so what does that say about America? Because that scares the shit out of me in Canada.
Well, it says that what's happened, and Trump is part of it, just as he's the architect of this conspiracy, whether he gets charged that way or not, he'll be part of the conspiracy. Osama bin Laden, just so everyone knows, and I realize that there was a time when I wouldn't compare a former president of the United States to a mass terrorist like Osama bin Laden, but Donald Trump has changed everything, including the way people discuss politics. I mean, he's had a lot of impact. So Osama bin Laden inspired what happened on 9/11. He was the inspiration to the people who did everything that it took. But Osama bin Laden was not the architect of it. There were other people, some of whom ended up at, not Mar-a-Lago, at Guantanamo Bay. But whether we're talking about the kind of people who end up at Guantanamo Bay or the kind of person that's been holed up in Mar-a-Lago, all you need to know is this: it doesn't matter what they throw at him. Donald Trump has at least 70 million accomplices. They're called voters. And what Donald Trump has done over the years, he has diminished and debased every single institution. So he's debased the law. Okay. Part of that is the kind of people he's put on the Supreme Court, and they're the ones that we hear about. Okay. But there are a number of people on all kinds of courts, federal courts, that Donald Trump has appointed that shouldn't be on the court, including the person who's judging his case in Florida.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has diminished media. We know that. We know what's happened to the media over the last number of years. Donald Trump started calling them fake news. They became
people. Yeah.
They became enemies of the people. They became enemies of democracy. They became people who were just creating an infomercial for Donald Trump. You've got Megyn Kelly, who used to have miles and miles of credibility. And Megyn Kelly, a number of years ago, when Donald Trump was a candidate for president, not the president, he was a candidate, Megyn Kelly asked Donald Trump about his misogyny, called him out on a number of things that he had said had allegedly done to women. And Donald Trump told a reporter the following day that Megyn Kelly was menstruating when she was being tough on him. He used other terms I'm not going to use, but that's what he said about her. Fast forward to this week. Megyn Kelly said that she has basically kissed and made up with Donald Trump over all of that nonsense. So at one time, it wasn't nonsense to say that a top anchor in America who was doing a great job calling him out during a presidential debate, it was not nonsense to say that stuff was coming out of her, as Donald Trump would say, coming out of all her stuff, out of all her places. I'm not going to repeat precisely what he said, but I think everyone understands what I'm talking about, okay? So it was, quote, that time of the month. That's what Donald Trump said. No other political candidate could ever have gotten away with that.
How does he, though? How does he? How is it possible? Because this is the question that fair-minded people ask.
I've got an answer. I've got an answer for you.
Well,
Donald Trump is not seen. I'm talking about where it matters to people, like in their gut. Yeah. In their gut, he is not a politician. For the people who love Donald Trump, he's our guy. And we know our guy says things, and those things he says get him publicity, and people talk about him and whatever. But he's basically our guy. So to speak street English, he may be an a-hole, but he's our a-hole. And most important, he's giving the finger to all the people that we don't like. And sometimes that's a racial comment. Sometimes that's a social comment. Sometimes that's a political comment. But they're not voting for Donald Trump. They're voting for his finger.
Yeah, because they feel the same way he does. And you know what I find? It's the same stripe that runs through every single one of those people. It doesn't matter, and we can, talk about the culture war and the ideology too, Charles. But You know, people that identify with that guy and people that support that guy are the same kind of person that support Pierre Polyev. And it's the same sort of like door that you don't want to open where you're like, okay, well, you know, the same hallmarks. I'm hearing the same things. I'm hearing the same rhetoric. I'm hearing the same give the people the power. I'm the person that can give you the power. I'm the only person that can get rid of gatekeepers. Up here, it's gatekeepers. Down there, it's government. And they have literally done a marvelous job painting themselves as the anti-hero, someone who has the ability, which you pointed out, I'm here for you. And one of the things he said, which I find fascinating because it's worked so well with the dummies, like the people that have the IQ of a nectarine. It's like, hey, they're not coming after me. They're coming after you, and I'm in their way. So if they take me down, you're next. That is some of the most effective messaging to paranoid idiots on the planet, is it not?
Well, look, I mean, when I was doing more conventional talk radio, if somebody was really coming after me hard, but they weren't terribly bright about it, and they were just coming after me because I was the conservative and they weren't conservatives, I would sometimes say to the listeners, okay, this guy is not coming after me. This guy's not targeting me. He's targeting you. He's attacking you. The only difference between what you're hearing from the Polyevs and the Trumps and what I was saying is what I was saying was objectively true. If I'm being attacked by somebody because they go on this anti-conservative tear and decide that I'm simply the target, well, I'm not the target. The target is the conservative audience. I just symbolize it. And when Polyev is asked, why aren't you suggesting anything proactively? Why don't you talk about some of the great policies that you would implement? Why do you just attack Trudeau, attack Trudeau, attack Trudeau? The answer that Polyev doesn't give, but the answer should be obvious. The answer is that's what works for the crowd that Polyev is working. And you can call them dummies. You can call them a lot of things. But there's a lot of them. And Polyev and his crew have identified them. But will it turn into an election victory? I don't know. It may. Will Trump's peace turn into a victory? One of the reasons I think that Trump has a good shot isn't just because Americans love show business and this idea of a guy in an orange jumpsuit, or might as well be in an orange jumpsuit, running for president. I guess it's interesting for people. It's never happened before. But one of the other things that's going on, Dean, is that you've got a situation where Republican money, sometimes called dark money, sometimes called sewer money, but money is making sure that there will be absolutely, for sure, other candidates which have some name value for voters who tend to vote for the Democratic Party. So Cornel West will likely be on the ballot, probably representing the Green Party. Cornel West is a professor in Massachusetts, a very articulate professor, well known to Democrats.
Very anti-Ukraine, very anti-NATO, very much in line with Russia's lockstep and what some of the other nutholes are saying about Russia being, and the Ukraine being, this should be peaceful. That's Russia's space. Same thing.
But there's a segment of people who vote for the Democratic Party who are totally open to that. And then you've got someone called Kennedy. Now, it doesn't matter how crazy he is, how anti-science he is, anti-Semitic, anti-Chinese, whatever. You can throw the kitchen sink at Kennedy. It's the word Kennedy that the Republican money wants. So he'll likely be an independent. I mean, at the moment, technically, he's running for the Democratic ticket against Joe Biden. Joe Biden's going to beat him for that. But that doesn't matter. What really matters to the Republican dark money is that Kennedy's name be on the ballot against Joe Biden. So they'll find the name of some party, whatever. But Kennedy will also be an independent because Kennedy will never stop running. He absolutely is addicted to it. At one time, he was a heroin addict, and now he's an attention whore, an attention addict.
He's also a doctor. He's an infectious disease expert now too.
Of course.
When it comes to race.
And he's an expert on viruses and how they get engineered in laboratories to make sure they kill as many whites as possible and as few Jews and Chinese people as possible. Someday,
makes all the sense in the world, doesn't it? From like a pathology perspective.
Someday, Kennedy's going to find out I'm white, and he's going to be very, very confused. Wait a minute! Oh, wait a minute! And I mean, that's one of the crazy. His sister, his nephew, everyone
Everybody's
is
like
tweeting
come out and said
apologies.
he's insane.
My
Sorry,
uncle didn't mean it,
he's nuts.
or my uncle,
Crazy
I
uncle.
want to distance myself from my uncle. Anyway, the point is,
everybody's got a crazy uncle, right? Yeah, RFK Jr. is the crazy uncle in the Kennedy family now.
So if they've got Cornel West on the ballot taking some votes from the Democrats, if they've got Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the ballot taking some votes, there's some other people I'm not even going to get into right now. One of them is Joe Manchin. He may be on the ballot. He's technically a Democratic Party, a senator out of Virginia, who will not be reelected because a Republican will beat him there. So he's open to the money and he's open to the opportunity. Anyway, there could be 4 or 5 or 6 horses peeling votes from Joe Biden. It doesn't matter whether each of them only get 0.25%, 0.5%, whatever. It's going to be a close race. And if there's 3 or 4 or 5 people peeling off 2 or 3 points from Joe Biden, Donald Trump has a very, very solid chance of winning the electoral college vote. And so the question then becomes, what happens if Donald Trump becomes president? Will it be similar to Donald Trump 101? And here's where I have to drop the smile. Okay. Yes, I'm an entertainer and I love the idea that we have a loyal audience and it makes me smile. But if you don't mind, I'm going to take that smile.
Drop it like it's hot.
I'm going to dispense with it. It's down the carburetor right now. There's nothing to smile about. Donald Trump wants to be a dictator. Donald Trump wants to be like Viktor Orban in Hungary, an authoritarian. But an authoritarian is basically a euphemism for a fascist. We tend not to use the word fascist if someone is elected, because the idea of people electing or re-electing a fascist really bothers us. So we just say the word authoritarian. But here's what authoritarians do. Like Orban, authoritarians squash freedom of the press. They also squash a lot of freedom for businesses. They determine which businesses will deal with the government, which ones won't, which businesses can be successful, which ones won't. They'll also determine who will sit on all of the various courts, and they will put people on the courts who they feel will rule in their favor and the favor of their comrades, as it were. And they will put people on school boards who they feel will teach children what they want taught, burn books if necessary. It goes on and on and on. But the authoritarian in Hungary, the authoritarian in Russia, and the authoritarian that's coming soon to the Oval wants to be in control of all aspects of American life. How does that affect Canada? Well, if Canada doesn't play ball the way Donald Trump wants to play ball, Donald Trump will boycott Canada. Donald Trump will tell businesses they can't buy stuff from Canada or they can't sell to Canada. If Donald Trump becomes the authoritarian he wants to be, he won't give a darn if on any given day his decisions have poor economic consequences or not. He will do what he wants to do. And does that mean it's a 4-year Donald Trump deal? No, because he'll be an authoritarian. He could make himself president for life or simply rig elections and say that, no, I can get elected again and again. The hell with this old idea that I can only be elected twice. I'm Donald Trump and I'm willing to change things. And how do we know all of this? Because Donald Trump's people are fairly transparent about it. Various people that Donald Trump is working with and setting up Donald Trump 201 talk to journalists, including the New York Times. So if you're looking for any information on this, just punch in Donald Trump dictator, New York Times, and you can find it. And if you just want the short strokes, you can simply go to my Twitter. Just go to @Charles Adler, and I've got it all for you. But Dean, there's no smiling here. There's nothing to be happy about. And if people think that because the American economy is in decent shape and Joe Biden can roll out all of these stats, the fact is Joe Biden is a very, very weak candidate. And it'll be very easy for some of these other people that I mentioned to peel votes. They'll be able to peel Joe Biden like an orange. He may be a good guy. He may be a great guy. He's not a great candidate for president.
Yeah, none at this juncture. You bring up a great point. And I want to talk about it. The effect, the chilling effect of your words were echoed in a segment yesterday on CNN. And I believe Abby Phillips was the young lady who was trying to explain to everybody what you just so easily and quickly and succinctly explained, which is like, hey, listen, this guy might win. And if he wins, they're already talking about a way to give him more presidential powers to not just push people around, but tell people how they're going to live, tell people who they're going to do business with, effectively becoming Russia in the process, which you pointed out. No term limits for Donald Trump, packing the courts in as much as he says he would with people who are going to be very friendly to him. That is a real possibility today. So let's just listen to this just to echo what you were talking about. This is yesterday on CNN, a great explanation about the coming dictatorship of the United States of America.
We sometimes kind of beat around the bush about this stuff when it comes to Trump. We don't have to in this case. Trump has said explicitly with his own words just a few weeks ago, if he's elected president, he will direct the Justice Department to go after his political enemies, President Biden. So he said that, and this is the roadmap that you just described about how he is going to do that.
Yeah, and it's not just going after Joe Biden. To your point, it's going after schools, it's going after curriculum, it's going after the law, it's changing the law, which America was predicated on, the democracy, which America, the peaceful transfer of power. I mean, just in that itself, Charles, what that says, because we've heard him say it many times, president for life. Maybe I should be president for life. Kim Jong-un, president for life. Putin, president for life. But what you just described is what we've seen happen in Russia over the past 2 decades.
He will go after the healthcare system. He will go after who gets a liver, who gets a heart, who gets a dialysis machine, and who doesn't. The person called Donald Trump is an authority freak. Over the years, people made fun of the fact that Donald Trump seemed to suck up to a lot of dictators and seemed to praise dictators all the time. And everyone was assuming, well, he's probably making money off Russia, probably making money off Saudi Arabia, probably making money off North Korea and China. I have no idea how much money he was making. I have no doubt that he was, because his eyes are always on the prize and they're always on dollars. But if anyone doesn't believe that Donald Trump really admires dictators more than he admires democratically elected people, if anyone really believes that, they simply haven't been paying attention. Because you can tell by the body language. When Donald Trump is in the presence of Vladimir Putin or the king of Saudi Arabia, or even that scumbag who runs a concentration camp that some people mistakenly call a country called North Korea, you can just tell that Donald Trump is having the best day. It's Christmas every day that Donald Trump gets to spend with a dictator. If anyone thinks that Donald Trump doesn't want to become much more like them and much less like the kind of people we call democratically elected Western leaders, if anyone has missed that movie, well, frankly, I don't know how you can miss it, because Donald Trump shows it to you. I mean, it's not even subtle. You don't need an explanation. You don't need analysis. You need different eyeglasses if you've missed that movie.
Are we boiled frogs when it comes to Donald Trump, when it comes to fascism, when it comes to this type of politicking where, you've got religion behind it, conservatism behind it, you got selfish? Hasn't this temperature been turned up over the past 8 years progressively? Because she said something at the start, right, where we were talking about how there are people who leveled down to the playing field, right? And we live in that society now where progressivism, being what it is, turns certain people off. And I get it, because you've got people on the progressive side who are like, if you don't think like us, then you're a terrible person. And I get how the terrible people on the other side are like, hey, I'm not that terrible, but I don't think like you, so I'm just going to fight you. But like, where are you at?
Well, I'm not. First of all, I think everyone knows by now that I'm not a progressive. I'm for what some of the progressives talk about, especially in the area of of culture. I'm egalitarian, and the progressives are much better sometimes at supporting egalitarianism. The business about LGBTQ. I mean, that's been in the news a lot lately. All the homophobia, transphobia that's going on. Progressives, to me, are fighting the better fight there. But in general, I'm not a progressive, because I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm not a social conservative. But here's what matters in this war that we're having. The progressive side, or let's call it the center left, isn't as vocal as the center right, isn't as out there, isn't as willing to do what it takes to get the attention you need to win. And so when it comes to being a warrior, and this is a war, It's a culture war. It's an ideological war. And I hope it never becomes a world war. But when it comes to being a warrior, the progressive side and the center left, okay? So the center left and the left. I think of the progressives as left. I think of the liberals in general as center left. I think of the conservatives in general, the average conservative, like most of my friends, are center right. And then there's the Poilievres who are farther right. I don't want to call them far right. Some are far right. Poilievre panders to the far right. I don't think of him specifically as far right, but he enables the far right. So that's the game. Well, the center right and the far right fight a lot harder and, yes, a lot dirtier than the center left. And the idea that you can win a war without getting dirty, that is something that only textbook writers believe. I've never met a person in combat who has ever believed that you just don't fight dirty because you're wearing a Canadian uniform or an American uniform. That stuff's great for the movies. That stuff's great for talk shows, especially those talk shows that to me are just sleeping pills, on the Canadian cable channels in the afternoon, where you've got somebody representing the conservatives and somebody representing the liberals and somebody representing the NDP and somebody representing the Loch Ness Monster, and everyone gets their 2.5 minutes to offer nothing but boring platitudes. You can't remember a damn thing they said. It's hard to remember. It's hard to remember a show where you're falling asleep all the time. And I could just see, shoplifting granny, when she gets home with her free Campbell soup from Loblaws, has her feet up, she's on the lounger, she's on the easy chair, watching one of these shows, CTV, CBC, Global, it doesn't matter. And within 10 minutes, she's asleep. Yeah. It's not because she had too much peanut butter on her sandwich. There's nothing on the screen but dullards, and they're safe. Nobody lights up the switchboards complaining about them because nobody remembers a damn thing they say. So if that's what your head is into, you can miss the war that's going on right now. But who's fighting better? There's no doubt about it. The right is fighting better. So nobody should be surprised if they're winning, and nobody should utter the dumbest words in the history of language. Well, the people who are on the side of the angels generally win. That too is a fairy tale. Okay, there are people who are not on the side of the angels. The people who run China have not been on the side of the angels. I could go to North Korea. I could go to the land I was born in, Hungary. I could go to many countries. I could go to Russia. When has Russia ever had a real democracy? The correct answer is never. And so even though we've had democracy in Canada and the United States, never take democracy for granted. Democracy has never been more fragile than it is right now.
What is that? That is a great point. We're talking about dictatorships and democracy. And, there's one side, back to the boiled frogs thing. You're like, don't worry about it. We got this. Don't worry about it. We're putting more money in your pocket. Don't worry about it. Carbon pricing sucks. Don't worry about it. We get it. Yeah, we get it. We want you to be in charge of this. We want you, the people, to be in charge of that. That is very enticing, right? And it really touches a chord in the middle. Because we're talking about center right, center left. Center is, in my mind, are people based in reality, right? The far right, the far left, the people that are on the poles or the extremes, those are people who are just so jacked up they can't even figure out breakfast. So, I think the people that are in the middle have a responsibility to kind of ferret out the truth. And we don't see any of that. Just case in point here in Canada. Biggest story in the world is Donald Trump getting a target letter from Jack Smith saying, hey, dude, you just tried to take over the United States with an armed insurrection, so you're in trouble. Not one story about it. Back to the boiled frogs theory, because, in Canada, you have ideologically placed media outlets that don't support the news if that news doesn't support their ideology. So nothing on the National Post website about Donald Trump, nothing on CTV News, nothing. Like front page news. This should be front page news and the only story on the front page.
It'll be, Dean, it'll be in all those places eventually. They just don't jump on it when it happens, and they wait for a few hours. They wait to figure out exactly what their take would be. But I don't disagree with you in terms of the cut and thrust of what you're talking about. And that's one reason why people don't trust a lot of what's just become known as the mainstream media. Yeah. Because unless you're an idiot, that the president of the United States being indicted for either conspiring in a coup or leading the conspiracy, whatever the specific charges. We're talking about a former president who is, for all intents and purposes, being indicted for treason, and there is no bigger story in the world. So the idea that whether it's the National Post or the CTVs, the idea that Canadians have to wait for it. Now, of course, most Canadians are online or they're watching, listening to people like us, so they're tuned in. But many Canadians do depend on those mainstream channels to interpret what's going on in the United States. And by the way, there will still be very, very little coverage on Canadian networks of the major story of the week, which is what the New York Times broke. And I'll repeat it again. The New York Times, several writers, credible people, award-winning journalists who have been spending months on this, talking to the people who are organizing for Trump, not the wackos that you see on Fox, not the wackos online, okay, but serious people. They happen to be arch conservatives, and they are planning on how to expand the presidency significantly. They feel they're on constitutional solid ground, that they can make the case that the presidency ought to have far more power, and that the idea of checks and balances, that is equality with the houses of Congress and the Supreme Court, is by the boards, totally unnecessary. All of the power on every aspect of life in the United States should be in the hands of one person, the so-called strongman, in this case, Donald Trump. That is the most important story of the week. That's the most important story of the year. And Canadian mainstream media is doing nothing with that story.
You're talking about, and we mentioned it earlier, I think Asher Rengappa kind of talked about it on if I'm not mistaken, I think she talked about it on ABC yesterday. He was a political commentator, used to be on CNN, and she was talking about the same thing. You and I kind of chatted about it briefly, is there's a movement in the GOP to grease the track right now where they're saying, hey, there's a chance you might win. What we want to do is we want to consolidate the power from Congress and Senate. We want to give it all to you. We want to make you the last word on who gets into the Supreme Court, who gets onto different court seats. We also want you to be the guy who decides how curriculum should look. So we, it is amazing to me because, America itself, as it is predicated on a democracy, a free democracy where people get a chance to vote, have people in, and these guys are figuring out a way to turn America into a dictatorship with this presidential powers thing, which you're talking about. The New York Times, 7 writers put together this massive story. They've been working on it for months. They put it out there, not even I'm going to use bad language. I'm going to just stop myself, just so you know. That was for you. They're not a popcorn fart about it in Canada. And that is our neighbor to the south. Like, we are effectively just a nation state of the United States of America. And the United States of America, some of the most powerful people that are on the GOP side of the political spectrum are like, we need to make Donald Trump, if and when he gets in, the de facto dictator, because that idiot will do anything the church wants, conservative wants, dark money wants, Russia wants, and he will give us this beautiful, in my estimation, evangelical society where kids are bowing their heads in prayer in the morning and abortion is not allowed and Sundays are for kids and everybody forces to go to church and then everybody gets more guns and, literally that's what we're talking about, is it not?
We're going to do an edit at 43:22. I'll be right back.
All right. We're live. He doesn't know. But I'll tell you this. The good news about Charles is he'll come back and we'll continue this podcast because, as you all know, Charles is what we call a professional in the industry. He's one of those guys that can do anything at any point in time. So I was under the impression he knew this was live. Even though it is live, we're good because I just muted his microphone. So you won't hear him go and get another coffee. You won't hear or see anything that he's doing in the privacy of his own home. That's the kind of guy I am. That's the kind of guy I am. In the middle of one of the most important conversations about the United States possibly turning into a dictatorship. And everybody in the United States that loves Donald Trump going, I'm cool if he stole state secrets that soldiers fought and died to get. Totally cool with it. I'm cool that he tried to take over the United States because I like guns too. I love Jesus more than I love human beings. So yeah, Donald Trump's my guy because he treats people in this country like absolute human garbage. That's what's happening in the United States. And for a lot of people out there that love the idea that Pierre Poilievre might be the next prime minister, that is the guy Donald Trump wants to become the next prime minister of the United States, because old PP will do anything that Donald Trump wants. And that's the beauty of that equation for the United States and for Canada. Charles Adler is back, ladies and gentlemen. Charles, so what does this mean now? Because we're talking about what this looks like for Canada and everything that bleeds up into Canada. And I was kind of mentioning while you were gone that, Pierre Poilievre is a wonderful dance partner for the GOP, the Conservative Party of Canada, who don't come out and say the things that get said down in the United States. And I know we both don't really like the gentleman because he's got no character. But we're talking about a political institution that really has no character at this point, right? Trying to take away a woman's right to choose, want to reopen the debate against, trans and non-binary in the LGBT community and people getting married, same-sex rights. I mean, is this something that you can see? Because, hey, dude, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party are leading in almost every poll, right? In the United States, Donald Trump is right there with Joe Biden. And we have a real hate on for Justin Trudeau. In the United States, they got a real hate on for Joe Biden. They don't, there's this movement of ineffectual leadership where they're like, he's too meek. We can't have that guy. We want the other guy who talks and bangs his fist and acts like an a-hole. Seriously, that's what we get.
Well, look, it happens in all democracies where people develop an appetite for change. Now we say to people that you've got to wait for the actual campaign. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of pundits like to figure out who's going to win the Stanley Cup 8 or 9 months before it happens. And then they like to just disappear and not remind anyone. And the television networks that they appear on, they never remind anyone. Oh, by the way, the guy who's so sure of himself tonight, he predicted that Pittsburgh would win the Stanley Cup. Pittsburgh didn't even get into the third round. Blah, 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 blah. So all I'm saying is, regardless of what we see in the polls, campaigns actually matter. And, Trudeau might have lost the last 2 elections in the polls before the election happened. But once the election happened, who cares what the polls said? The polls were wrong. The polls are right to some extent on that particular day. That's why they always say, if the election were held today. Well, the election isn't being held today. There will be a campaign. But to deny that there is change in the wind, to deny that many more people are open to a change, that is to, deny the obvious. I mean, every now and then the public is interested in throwing out whoever's there. Yeah. And they don't necessarily do what we sometimes do. They don't calibrate. They don't, get the tape measure out. They don't get the microscope out. They don't get out the MRI. They don't do a lot of inspecting and investigating of the alternative. They're just focused on what they have right now. And if they're not particularly happy with their lives right now, they will pin that on whoever's in leadership, provincial, federal, and sometimes opt for a change. But I still have to keep the powder dry until the campaign. I think that a campaign, a Justin Trudeau versus Pierre Poilievre campaign, will be very, very interesting. And I'd say that anybody who thinks that it's a sure thing either way is wrong.
Yeah, I would agree with you too. It's just the temperature, right? What do you say to a Canadian today? Like, if you could educate, if you had 35 million people in one room, kind of like, where they do those, like, what do you call them? The timeshare vacation presentation. Yeah. It's like, hey, listen, $20,000 a year. You can go and stay in Mexico for 5 days and you can stay there like 3 times a year. It's like, oh, I'm not interested. But let's say you get 35 million Canadians and you're like, I am like, because you're ringing a bell. You've been ringing a bell on Twitter. You've been talking to people about the coming dictatorship in the United States. What is afoot? You've been doing an incredible job of that, specifically over the past couple of days. How would you educate a Canadian as to, hey, pay attention to what's going on there and how it correlates to what's happening here? What would you warn them about? Because we're talking about dictatorships and democracy today.
Well, I would say to people that if you see that a government or that politicians are trying to change things that you feel politicians should keep their hands off, if you feel that politicians are telling you that it's time for them to change the school system, if it's politicians who are sort of enabling or being okay with, book burning, if you see politicians going after minority groups, I think I need to help people to understand that history shows us that all of us are a minority group. All of us are a minority of one. And if they can go after one group, they'll go after other groups. history shows that people who go after one group never stop with one group. And so when you see that kind of thing, the book burners and the people who attack the minorities, their favorite minorities to attack these days are LGBTQ and specifically, transgendered people. That's where the attack is. But always understand that if they're willing to attack one group, they're willing to attack all. And the people who are into that, okay, are very much like the Trumpers. And if you get disgusted by that in the United States, don't be foolish enough to follow the watered down Canadian wannabe version. It never leads to anything that's good. I don't know why that is. I can't just explain it in 30 seconds or less, except to say this. People who live on the dark side, people who are looking for votes on the dark side, people who are trying to figure out what the darkest part of you is, and they're going to go after that, are people who never do you any good. They never do you any good in real life, and they don't do any good in politics. Politics is supposed to be about serving the public, not pandering to certain members of the public, not polarizing the public, not harming the public, serving the public. It's really tough for me to see a book burner as serving me.
And telling people that, hey, you don't need to read this. We think you don't need to read this, and so you're not going to read this. There's an ad going around. I don't know if you saw it. As a couple, they're in bed, they're getting ready to go for it. You know what I'm saying? And there's an old guy standing in the corner. It's a GOP guy. He's like the local representative in Congress, and he's like, guy reaches for a condom, and the old guy goes, don't use that. And he's like, what are you doing in our room? Well, I'm your elected representative, and I get to tell you how this works now in the United States of America. And the woman's like, you're creepy. Get out of here. Nope. You elected me, and we're trying to tell you what you can do with your body. And we do not like prophylactics because we love Jesus way more. So unfortunately, you're not allowed to use that. And you're going to have to get pregnant and figure it out. And I thought, saucy, really saucy, but it was accurate. Right. And we have the same pending people up here that have the same pending, issues with birth control and your right to choose and the life that you live. And it's amazing that those are the same people that campaign on freedom to me. And it happens on both sides of the border. And you know what's amazing to me? That there are people out there that go, yeah, that's freedom to me. Really? Like, that's your freedom? Your freedom is telling me what I can and can't do. And that's really what it boils down to, right? We've got two different political ideologies. One is, hey, this is about you. This is about serving you. And sure, politics is a dirty game and everybody's on the take. But the other one is just coming right out and saying it and then going, yeah, but that's freedom to us and should be freedom to you too. It's just bizarre to me.
Dean, I've never been a woman, and I don't think I ever will be. Okay, I think it's good bet. Okay, good bet I won't be. But something has befuddled me forever on the abortion issue. Okay, and it is how women in general aren't as volatile as they would be if it was me. Excuse me for my elementary school teacher who may still be alive and listening. If it were me, if somebody was telling me, I don't care whether they're called a Republican, conservative, fundamentalist, Christian, Jew, Muslim, I don't care. I don't care what their label is. If I'm a woman and someone is telling me whether or not I have to stay pregnant, the things I'm thinking about are all illegal. But I would definitely want to hurt them. Okay, I'll just put it that way.
Yes.
I don't care if it's a male or a female, but they're called religious. It just amazes me how self-restrained women are. Because putting aside the word abortion, let's say it was a different procedure that does apply to males. Okay, let's say it was a hip transplant that you needed because you'd been your hips over the years were destroyed. It doesn't matter why. Okay, some people need it earlier than others, but at some point in many people's lives, they need a hip transplant. Can you imagine what you would do if you needed a hip transplant, or one of your sons needed one, or your dad needed one, and some politician came along, or some political party came along,
not allowed,
and decided that no, we're not doing that anymore. You're not doing it anymore. I mean, you'd want to rearrange their faces.
Yeah. Or you don't qualify for this because of what happened to your hip. And I'm not a doctor, I'm a former used car salesman who won an election, and I'm gonna tell you how this shit works. Like, and it works up here too. Like, we don't have any qualified people in government. We don't have lawyers doing lawyer stuff in government. We got former broadcasters being heritage ministers. Like, it's just bizarre, right?
The other day, Pierre Poilievre was talking about the nursing shortage. Okay, we all understand why there's a nursing shortage. Our population overall is increasing at a much greater level than our nursing population. Sometimes things are just math. I know math ain't sexy, but it's the law. It's the law of nature. Math actually matters. So we don't have enough nurses. So Poilievre decides to say at this town hall that he's doing in the interior of British Columbia, he's saying that when he's prime minister, this problem won't exist, because when he's prime minister, all of those nurses who were suspended or canned because during COVID they didn't want to be vaccinated, that won't exist anymore. And so nurses who don't believe in vaccinations will be allowed to work again. And that will just, bingo, that will solve the nursing
0.01% of the nursing population, by the way. So that's fascinating. Like, how good are those nurses?
First of all, I mean, there's there are these regulations, and these are provincial and not federal. But the point is, there's regulations that nurses, they're different people in different professions, where it's mandated. The military is another one of them, that they be vaccinated. And then there's a real simple reason for that. I know that some people may have a hard time with this, okay, but nurses come into contact with a lot of vulnerable people. That's why they're there. Okay, vulnerable people need nurses, so we need the nurse to stay as healthy as possible.
Yeah,
so
for her and for the client. Yeah,
so she's not spreading diseases to people whose immune systems are shot.
Yeah.
Okay. Shot.
And by the way, when they applied for the job, got the job, when they signed that piece of paper saying, "Yeah, I'll work here," it's like, you have to have all these vaccines. Are you sure you want to work here? And they're like, "You're goddamn right, I do. I love nursing." And then all of a sudden, this thing comes around, and Facebook happens, and they're like, "Yeah, I don't believe in it anymore." And you're like, "Okay," and it's the same thing with every single one of them. And like you said, it's correlation. It's just it's part of what your job is. It's like if you were a teacher, and they're like, "We got a professional development day because we got a new course, you got to go," and you're like, "I don't do those anymore. I've just decided I'm done." Oh, okay, really? Well, then you're fucking fired. Like, that's how that works where I'm from.
So Poilievre was saying that once all those nurses are brought back into the system, eureka, it's solved. And all these trained SEALs, they're just loving him, right? He's the new Messiah, right?
Yeah.
And they're applauding like crazy. And I was just thinking, I'm always asking myself, how many people do these people in the town hall represent? Are there millions of Canadians willing to believe that if only you brought back, all those shiploads of nurses? No, I didn't say S-H-I-T. I said shiploads. S-H-I-P, okay? I'm maintaining integrity here for this broadcast.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay?
That's right.
Because I know that, you're going to drop 2 or 3, and I've got to make up for it by dropping none. But in any case,
but you bring up something this is very important to talk about. And I talk about it with people, and people like you or people like Karima, a few other people in my life that I do content with. I'm like, "Hey, isn't this just because people are dumb?" And she's like, "Well, I wouldn't quite say that." But like, to sit there and listen to Pierre Poilievre say, "I'm bringing all the nurses back that aren't vaccinated, all the unhealthy, dirty ones. I'm going to bring all of them back." And I know that number is 0.1% of all nurses in this country. Like, I know that in my head as a number, right? Like, it's a fact. And I'm like, well, if I do that math, you're bringing back like 600 nurses for the entire country of 35 million people. You need like 40,000 of them, dude. You don't need 600. You need like a whole new hiring spree. And he's got people that are in the crowd going, "That's got to work, right?" I mean, I don't know anything about it, but I'm clapping.
And the trickle of nurses, they're sitting there waiting for Pierre Poilievre to come in, right? They haven't moved on and done other kinds of jobs. They're waiting.
I put out a post yesterday. I made a gluten-free. By the way, you would have thought it was delicious, Charles. So I made a gluten-free chicken pesto pizza with arugula. I've been told it's not arugula, by the way. It's arugula. And I put this post out. And I could have not taken this as an opportunity to take a shot, but you know me, I can't help myself. And I'm like, "Hey, everybody, look at this delicious pizza I made. I picked up some cooking skills during the convoy. While you guys should have been going to get trained as sous chefs, I did it myself." See what you can do when you apply yourself. Like, it was the easiest thing in the world for me. And the cavalcade of hatred for that gluten-free pizza came back, and I was like, yeah, bring it. I love it. This is why I'm here. But it's the truth, right? Like, we live in that society where you got the haves and the have-nots. You got capables and not capable people, and the not capable people are still out there going, you know what? We're all victims. And Pierre Poilievre is going to save us from our victimhood, as is Donald Trump. So let's go team victim, right? That's where we're at.
I mean, think about this, okay? We go into, when I say we, I'm talking about the convoy guys, okay? So we got, guys with biceps that are bigger than fire hydrants, okay? And what are they doing with those biceps? They're honking. They're honking the horns, loudest horns in Canada. And so once again, poor Granny, who didn't mean to shoplift the Campbell tomato soup at Loblaws, okay? She can't sleep. And her dog and cat can't sleep. And her baby can't sleep. And her hedgehog can't sleep because, Bubba Biceps is honking. And Bubba Biceps is honking for what? For freedom? For freedom not to be vaccinated?
Not interested.
And all these people are going, yeah, that's what Canada's about. That's not what Canada's about. That's not what Canada's about.
Never has been. On. It's about mutual responsibility. It's about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It says reasonable limitations. That's what it says, right?
I didn't fall in love with Canada because of some goofball jacked up with a lot of steroids,
honking horns,
preventing grandma from sleeping. That's not Canada.
No, but might be. Like that, like we're close. That's the thing, Charles. It's like I'm watching the revolution of idiocy, which is really what I put it down to. You're a better man than me. We've established that, so I have no problem saying this. But the revolution of idiocy, which is happening in the United States, where all the idiots are like, yeah, no more books, don't say gay. That's the society we want to live in. Everybody goes to church twice on Sundays. Everybody gets a bunch of guns, and let's get wasted on cheap moonshine. That might be Canada soon if Pierre Poilievre gets his way, right? Like, he literally might be Canada soon. So like,
doesn't matter, folks. It doesn't matter how many of these things I do with my buddy Dean. About 40 minutes into it, I want to drink, not the Pepsi and the tea and the coffee.
Something harder.
I want something they make in Scotland. They do make elsewhere
in a cask.
But the Scottish make it the best. You're part Scottish, aren't you?
Yeah. British Scottish.
How do you live without Scotch? I mean, let's put the politics aside here. How does a Scotsman live without Scotch? I mean, there's things. There's things I just can't understand.
So I go to Scotland. There's like a couple months ago. I'll go with my parents, right? My dad once. He's like, let's go. We're all go. We're going to golf together. So I have this marvelous vacation for like 10 days, right? And I don't drink. I haven't drank for 6 years. And my mom's a bit of a drinker. She loves her scotch. And she's everywhere she goes. She's like, I'll have a scotch. She have a scotch in Scotland golf course. I'll have a scotch at the golf course. And my dad's like, he's a teetotaler. He doesn't drink. My brother's a reverend, but he drinks, right? So you got my mom and reverend brother, and you got the two guys that don't drink that love to get hammered in Scotland, Scottish people. And they're like, and I grabbed my mom's drink at one golf course. I'm like, let me just smell it. Let me just smell it. So here's how I manage that. I'm like, I'm Scottish. I'm British. That is what we do over there. But if I do it, I'm going to wake up with a hangover, and I'm going to want to look at people around me and go, we need to go get Chinese food. I can't keep living like that, Charles. I cannot keep living like that. Charles Adler, ladies and gentlemen, new podcast, which you can get anywhere you get your fine podcasts. It is one of the biggest in Canada. It is news. It is commentary. It is heart. Who did you interview today? What do we got coming up today?
Well, I'm gonna do a sermon on why Chinese food will always be number one
for hangovers.
People who have a drinking problem. Okay, we've got Kathleen Petty today.
Yeah,
Kathleen Petty is, in my opinion, the greatest interviewer in the country, and she's a role model for me. She also is the host of the West of Center podcast, and she also likes Scotch. If there's a kind of I guess you might want to call it a thread that runs through all of the interviews that I do with my favorite people. They all love Scotch, and I believe that if you had treated your body better, if things had gone a little differently for you, if you had a I don't know, a
Turn
molecule
into
of
a raging nutcase
okay,
drinker.
no, you're off the charts, brilliant and off the charts creative,
Yeah.
but you've got a discipline issue.
Yeah,
You know,
a
it
little
was
bit. Impulse.
Francis Coppola was once asked, "Where do you find this talent?" This was during the filming of Apocalypse Now, and there's talent everywhere. It's crawling out of the pores everywhere. Okay,
Yeah.
And Coppola's asked, "Where do you find all this talent?" And he said, "Talent is very easy to find. Disciplined talent is difficult."
Yes.
And so you are now, the last number of years, you've been disciplined talent. That's why you're a new man, and that's why I'm enthusiastic about working with you. But if you had not had that discipline issue,
Yes.
you and I would be sharing a pail of Glenlivet right now.
Maybe Talisker. Maybe sharing some Talisker. Lafroig. Have you had Lafroig yet? That is a delicious scotch.
What about
Very
Macallan's?
peaty. Macallan. Oh yeah, I love that, dude. It's okay. Yeah, dude, I love it. I love. Dude, you're bringing me down memory lane. It's like I can smell it and taste it.
So there you go. So that's why I still think of you as a fellow Scotch drinker. You're just on pause for now.
You know what I bought? I bought fake gin the other day.
Ooh, fake gin.
Oh yeah. I sent
how
a
is
picture of
that?
it. Well, I sent a picture of it to my significant other, and I'm like, "What do you think?" She's like, "Yeah, go ahead and get hydrated. That'll be a lot of fun." I'm like, So I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna feel like a drinker for like an afternoon. I'm like, "This is delicious. What is this? I don't even fucking like it. It's terrible." Rather have a Pepsi.
Did you have fake tonic water, sometimes called the urine of a hedgehog?
Fake tonic water? Oh, you mean like sugar-free tonic water?
Did you have your fake gin with hedgehog urine? Because you haven't lived, baby. You got to live a little.
Dude, I used to mix vodka, beer, and wine. So it's like, hey, right? Like, just give it a go. Charles Adler, ladies and gentlemen, great podcast going. Download, subscribe wherever you get your fine podcasts. It's one of the biggest podcasts in Canada for a reason, because he gives a crap about the information that he puts in your ears. He is your friend. He is your Sherpa when it comes to some of the issues that nobody wants to talk about. Charles Adler podcast, Spotify, Apple, doesn't matter where you get your fine podcasts. Go to Crier Media, crier.co for more of my friend Charles Adler. Thank you for doing this, sir.
In the words of Sound of Music, Edelweiss, Edelweiss.
Charles Adler, ladies and gentlemen, go get this podcast. God, I love that guy. I wish everybody could have like a 20-minute phone call with him. Just 20 minutes. You won't find a nicer, smarter individual. The history that guy knows, and just how kind he is. Like, and it's not just kind, he's an assassin with content in his language. You cannot not download or subscribe to his podcast today. You have to. He's got a couple of podcasts, different versions of it, by the way, but it's under the Charles Adler podcast. One is The Truth, where he boils something really difficult to understand down into like a 3 to 5 minute bit, and that's its own podcast. And then he's got long form podcasts. And some of the interviews that he has, some of the people that are in his Rolodex, and not just that. I mean, there is no better. He said, Miss Betty's the best interview. He's the best interviewer I've ever had a chance to talk to, like in my life. And I've interviewed a bunch of people. So that man needs to be part of your life on a daily basis. The Charles Adler podcast, wherever you get your fine podcasts. I want to thank him for being here. I want to thank you all for being here as well. You know, time being what it is, you can't get time. And when you give us your time like this, it means something. We're actually humbled by it. So thank you. And I want to thank our partners over at Cantork as well. Cantork, Canada's assembly tool experts. Cantork makes rugged, hardworking, beautiful torque wrenches. Canada's leading industrial tool experts, offering you the very best in sales, service, rentals, calibration, and maintenance, custom fabrication of industrial torque tools. And they are an official partner of Tagliani Racing, the Pinty's NASCAR series. Alex won the Toronto Indy this weekend. Big shout out to the people at Cantork. Big shout out to the people at Quick. Big shout out to Tagliani Racing and my friend Colin Livingston, who's the principal at Cantork as well. Cantork has been making torque wrenches, looseners, and fasteners for industries that are impossible to find solutions for. Torque wrenches that are big, small, weird, shaped in a different, you can't get it in there to loosen a bolt. That's what these guys do for industries around the world. Railroad, steel industry, forestry, heavy machinery, nuclear. These are your guys, Canadian made, Canadian manufactured. And if there's one thing I know about Canada is we do a pretty darn good job. That's what Colin does. Go to cantork.com for more information. Today brought to you by our friends at Gitch, underwear that you will never take off, just to wash. These are the only ones you're going to wear. Gitch is engineered for any level of performance. Boxer briefs right now with the pouch in the front. You can't miss with these things. They're the most comfortable underwear you'll ever wear, made for all levels of performance. So you can walk, run, or sprint through your day. Very soft and moisture wicking. You know what happens after a long day down there. You need moisture wicking, gentlemen. Luxurious. You'll never want to take these things off. Go to edsfineimports.com. Order your underwear today. Gitch3 is your promo code. That promo code will get you a free pair of underwear. That's right, free. And you know what I like to say? If it's free, it's for me. I've been saying that for years. That's the best part about being in radio in the golden age of radio when people actually listen to it. People just bring you free shit all the time. Xboxes, food, cars sometimes. Yes, they gave me free cars for a couple of years. It was weird. Anyway, you want something for free? Go to edsfineimports.com. Punch in promo code GITCH3 on your way out when you buy 3 or more, and you get a free pair of underwear. That's from me to you. That's from Ed to you. Take it up on it. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks to Charles Adler for joining us today. Thank you for joining us today. We always appreciate your time and your company. Don't forget, you can get everything we do at crier.co, Crier Media, where you can find everybody from Charles Adler to myself, to Marianne Iveson's Let's Take This Outside podcast. Something for everyone. Go to crier.co today. Make sure you rate, subscribe. Thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.